What's up guys, welcome to the video I said I was going to make last week and then realized I was in over my head and didn't make it last week, then asked for your help and then got a lot of your help, which thank you by the way. This is my unscripted review of Soul Eater. So let's get started. So like I said, last week I asked for all of your all's help because I realized that I was a bit in over my head in terms of writing a review for this entire series in like less than a week. So I asked for your help, you gave me your help, thank you so much, and there was a lot of it. A lot of you wrote a couple books worth of stuff in the comments, and I tried to read through all of them, and what I did was I kind of narrowed it down to the things that I can break up into story-related, both good and bad, character-related, both good and bad, and then the sort of art, music, and technical side of things. So starting with the story, let's get right into the review. So when people would comment about the story, a lot of times it was mainly just about the general premise of the show, which is in and of itself extremely unique. The idea of this world where there are meisters and weapons, and these weapons are people who turn into weapons. And the idea that a soul is sort of a consumable thing or a tangible thing, that whole idea is extremely unique. And if you guys have seen the most recent manga and anime from this writer, you'll know that they are very, very good at sort of writing things with religious symbolism or meaning behind them and tying it into a very unique story, because Fire Force does this, and so does Soul Eater. The world itself is extremely unique, and I wish they had gone into more detail about this. The moon and the sun and the looks on their faces, the moon reminds me a lot of the moon with the face from Majora's Mask, and the sun is just creepy. Now, towards the end of the story, without getting into any spoilers, there's a constant sort of theme of this battle between hope and despair, sort of like Danganronpa, or in this instance with certain characters, madness and sanity. And the idea of these characters being able to harness madness, or not so much harness it, but more or less sort of use madness to their advantage to become stronger, but also giving up a chunk of their humanity and a big portion of their soul, is an interesting theme that's played into it, especially towards the end of the series, but is sort of hinted at throughout. And lastly, one of the things that hooked me on the series, and apparently reading the comments, a lot of other people, was its perfect blend of comedy and serious. I mean, even in this first episode I'm playing behind me right now, immediately after this incredible battle, animated by Yutaka Nakamura, by the way, but immediately after this epic fight scene, we have Soul getting yelled at by Spirit, or Death Scythe, and the delivery from Vic Mignogna is hilarious. The delivery from the original Japanese actor is hilarious, and it just immediately breaks up this tense, action-packed moment with some well-needed and perfectly executed comedy. And this is seen throughout the series. It is so awesome to have this great blend of dark themes and serious tones mixed in with comedy. And they do play into this quite a bit with some really well-executed moments of, you know, serious turning to comedy and comedy turning to serious, and it never feels unnatural, which is something that is an extremely difficult feat when you're trying to keep a serious tone and easily make it into a more light moment. But when I was going through the comments, those were sort of the main things that stood out to me, and the reasoning behind them each made a lot of sense, and I try to kind of give those examples, but man, like, the good in the story is something that I really wish would be elaborated on a lot more, and I just kind of had to read the manga for that, which this isn't a manga review, this is an anime review, but I will say those themes do continue very, very well on to the end of the series. However, when it comes to the story, and we talk about bad, there is only one thing, probably because it overshadows any other small little imperfections of the story, that is so bad that it was pretty much the only thing mentioned in the comments when they talked about bad parts of the story. So like I said, I read the manga. This never happened in the manga. Thank God. But essentially the entire final arc of the anime series was an anime only, and it was not that good. So this is going to get into spoilers, so if you guys don't want to get spoiled, if you haven't seen the show already, skip to this time here. If you want to skip, and if you do skip, I'll see you when we get there. If you aren't skipping, let's talk about this bad moment. So despite this entire long-running theme of hope and despair and characters getting stronger and becoming more, you know, the shonen standards, despite all of this, we don't even have the weapon meister pair fighting the final boss and delivering the final blow. And it is so bad because essentially it's facing off against the Kishin, the big baddie of the series. And it had the potential to be very interesting. They did develop some interesting moments with characters like Medusa coming back and corrupting Stein and all of these little things here and there that were really interesting moments that could have been played into more and made into a more interesting finale than what we actually got. But instead what we get is the Kishin becoming this big madness monster and our 3 Meisters and 4 weapon characters fighting him. And it's a cool fight, don't get me wrong. They have some really good moments and it's worth watching to some degree. However, what we end up with is the final blow being delivered not by a Meister weapon pair, but essentially by a Meister, Maka, who got a pep talk from her friends to come back from the brink of despair despite the fact that she was basically like losing her mind and realizing there was no way to win, dodging every single one of his attacks and punching him square in the face to break his face in half, and that was it. So all this build-up, all these epic fights, this entire unique world, and the potential to have longer-running stories and unanswered questions finally answered, all of these things thrown out the window for Maka One-Punch Man destroying the Kishin. I don't really think I need to go into too much detail as to why that's bad, but let's just dive into that for a minute. The entire final arc built up to this fight, and really, it did an okay job of it. Like, I would have completely accepted a decent final fight. Even, hell, I would have accepted like a fairy tale conversion to the good side sort of character arc for freaking the Kishin, but no, we don't get that. We just get a One-Punch Man destruction, and it's over. It's so aggravating because the series is held up as a masterpiece, rightly so, and one of the main pillars that's held up is its story. And really, that ending, if the rest of the series had not been as god level as it was, would have never even been considered as a good anime. Like, the whole series probably could have been ruined by that if it was any worse. I'm completely honest. I don't know if it comes across in video, but I don't like that ending. So I'm going to move on now because that was the most hated and most commented bad portion of the story that was, well, most commented. So moving on now, we're going to talk about the characters because the characters are what drive the story forward, and there's some good, there's not a lot of bad, but there is some bad, so we'll get into both of those. So the characters themselves, of course, are extremely unique. We have very well-developed characters, things like the development of Maka as a character in terms of her strengths, her willingness to fight. We have all of these other characters like Tsubaki, Black Star, Death the Kid, Liz and Patty, and of course, Soul Eater himself. And all of these characters have so much time in the sun, and all of these characters have so much development just in this series. Considering how long the manga ran, the amount of story and character development we got just in these characters, just in the anime series, is awesome. I mean, hell, they even developed secondary characters like Sid, and we even get the samurai whose name I forget. Like, they develop those characters extremely well. Arachne, they even do a pretty decent job of developing her, though we'll get into some other stuff about her and a couple other things later on. And the other thing is, like I said earlier, the characters being able to turn into weapons, the soul synchronization, certain Meisters being able to channel their soul's energy out in their palms, or characters like Professor Stein, who I could do an entire rant on, are able to channel that out of their hands, but not only that, but match their soul resonance with any character, any weapon, which is damn impressive considering the rules set up by the actual, well, manga writer. But they do these rule-breaking things so infrequently of like characters being able to change their soul's wavelength and stuff. They do that so infrequently that when it does arise, it doesn't feel out of place. And it's not just the Meisters with unique abilities, but the weapons, who obviously can turn into weapons. There's even a difference between certain characters as weapons, and that is actually expanded upon quite a bit. So characters like Soul or Liz and Patty can transform into one kind of weapon, or maybe change and advance into a slightly more powerful weapon, depending on the soul status of both characters, the Meister and the weapon. But then you get characters like Tsubaki, who can change into multiple kinds of weapons. That is also really cool and a unique thing that they do play into quite a bit. And of course, we have the character dynamics. This was something brought up a bit in the comments, and it's a sort of moment that you realize that the characters don't just grow up as characters, which is what you'd expect from a shonen. They grow up together. You have these characters growing stronger, the bonds between the two of them becoming stronger. And it's this amazing moment. And, well, it makes several amazing moments. But it's these amazing moments that really do kind of play up the whole characters are not only getting stronger, but their team. They drive that team dynamic so well. I mean, hell, Soul didn't trust anybody, and Maka didn't trust any man because of her dad. And we now have both of them towards the end of the series, spoilers by the way, both of them sort of driving each other to improve as not just characters, but as people in the story. It's awesome. And just overall, the characters, for the most part, are extremely well written. Now, I say for the most part because this is where we talk about some of the things that are just bad. So getting into the bad, one of the big things is that while there are quite a lot of well-developed characters, there are still quite a few who aren't very well developed. I use Death himself as an example of this because while it is sort of explained in the manga, we don't have a lot of explanation on him. And while the world is sort of, the rules of the world rather, are established as you need to have XYZ compatibility to use another weapon, they don't really play into that with Death. He's just sort of the exception. They even have Spirit working very well with Professor Stein, even though obviously Stein has said before he has to change his soul wavelength to work with different weapons. And there are other instances of this. I mentioned Arachne earlier, and I feel like her backstory could have been significantly more interesting, but they sort of left that aside to dive more into the Kishin and a couple other surrounding characters. Another gripe that I saw for a lot of people, and this is something I very much agree with, is Black Star. A lot of people were annoyed by Black Star, thought he was an irritating character, and while he gets better, I will agree that he definitely took too long to stop being irritating. And that can really drive a lot of people away from an anime. So if I had one gripe, it would be the way that Black Star was written and how long it took for him to actually develop as a character. And then the most annoying character of all, Excalibur. Fools! I know he was written to be annoying, but sometimes there is such a thing as being written too well to do a certain thing. And that's the case. He is so irritating, oh my god. That being said, Nate Wants to Battle did a pretty awesome, like, I guess cover, you could call it, of his song. So there is one good thing that came out of him. Excalibur, Excalibur. But overall, the general comments for the character development and the way the characters were done was mostly positive, and that's a good thing because really this series is considered a classic. And there are a lot of things that contribute to a series being this good and being considered sort of an icon or a classic. And while there are some bad things with the story and the characters, like I said, there is a lot more that is just so good. And yeah, I think those easily outweigh what ends up coming down as bad. Even if it got close with the story ending, like I said, even with that, I think it still is completely overshadowed by the rest of the series being as good as it is. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, and this was something that was not touched on a lot in the comments, there were quite a few people who did sort of mention things here and there, but it wasn't really delved into, was the art, the music, and some of the technical stuff. So first off, the music, perfect, top tier. Each character theme is awesome, Soul having his own character theme, especially in the latter portions of the series, and especially when it came to Soul, the just bad but good and tonally weird piano that they would use to set the scene and set the tones with the madness that constantly plagued Soul was awesome. When it came to the music for Black Star and Death the Kid and all these other characters, it was just so well set, and they never really strayed from the tone that was set at the very start of the series. And obviously animation and art style can help set a tone, but music is another big one, and one of the things that can easily set the tone right out of the gate before you even get into the main meat of the episode is the opening. All the openings, honestly. But, of course, the best, my favorite, the first opening, Resonance, because it's classic, it's iconic, it's so well done, and it, again, really does a great job of setting the levity, seriousness, light and dark, all of these different things, it sets up so perfectly right before you even get into the episode. Some people mentioned that it was kind of cartoony, which I agree with, but I think that actually works to a lot of people's benefits, because if you're not getting into this as an anime, especially back when it aired on Toonami, you were getting into this thinking more in line of a cartoon. I know I did. And that actually made it a lot easier to watch for a lot of people because that cartoony look sort of feels familiar here in the West. And so it just worked. People could watch it more easily, and it wasn't this sort of, oh, well, you know, I could watch it, but it's an anime. Animes look weird. Yeah, it still looked kind of anime-esque, but the cartoony design and the unique art style, even within the anime genre, I think worked a lot more in the favor of people who weren't really looking to get into watching an anime. Now, lastly, one of the big things for me, and I think this really helped with a lot of people, but I know it helped for me, was the dub, because I watch stuff in sub now, and I actually watch a lot of shows that are only in sub right now, but back in the day, I didn't really watch a lot of shows that were dubbed, or subbed, sorry, because I just thought it was easier for the dub. I didn't want to do reading. And this came out in what I would consider sort of the golden era of dubs, just because it was still before it became a consistent weekly thing, which, don't get me wrong, shows like My Hero Academia fly in the face of the general misconception that a dub done that quickly can't be good, because it is, but this was one that very clearly took time to be good. And you still get older actors in this series that you don't see really working in anime anymore. I mean, hell, you've got Troy Baker voicing Excalibur, for God's sake. So, like, yeah, you don't see him working in anime too often anymore, but this was great.
Look at this stupid alien!
Wanna fight?
And overall, just all of these things that I've mentioned and all the things that you have mentioned, which thank you again for commenting, all of these things that you have mentioned and that I've used are perfect examples of why this series is timeless. In my opinion, a timeless classic that if you haven't seen it, you absolutely should. If you have seen it, shut up, Siri. Sorry, Siri went off for some reason. Anyway, this is a timeless show. So honestly, if you haven't seen it already, go watch it. You are doing yourself a disservice by not seeing it. Really, it's that good. Even with the bad stuff I mentioned, it is still phenomenal. And overall, I think that the people who have watched it, if you want to know the thoughts, go over to this video and read the comment section, because that's where I got a lot of these good and bad recommendations and references from. So yeah, it's a very well-watched and well-opinionated show. Either way, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for your contribution to this entire, I guess, fan-contributed review. You guys are awesome. I knew if I would ask you all for help, I would get it. And I tried to do my best with keeping the video timely. It's a bit long, but either way, I tried. And apart from that, thank you guys for watching. And like and subscribe if you haven't already. I try to engage with fans as much as possible. So if you're new here, this is going to hopefully be slightly more regular of trying to keep in touch with fans and get you all to give input. But either way, thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to stay safe out there, and I'll see you all in the next video. Go watch this freaking show. I'll put a link to it in Funimation. And yeah, have fun with it and have a good one. In case you guys missed it in every other video that I make and every ending card that I've ever made, I do make shirts, and I've actually got quite a few really cool designs and even more coming out pretty soon. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you guys check out a shirt. I'll be running some specials pretty soon, so if you want to wait, that's fine, because I'll be running some specials to save you some money. But otherwise, if you're into anime, you're into supporting a reviewer and that kind of stuff, and you're into cameras and whatever else, go check it out.